Welcome, everybody, and glad you could join us for what I think is going to be a great discussion on cyber defense and zero trust with three leaders from the Navy. And if you were able to join us at last year's edition of this event, you might remember we had a great panel of Navy experts with us talking about identity services and how at that point, building out a new identity framework was really a foundational piece of getting to zero trust. Just a year later now, and a lot has happened in that time, the Navy now has an actual working implementation of zero trust. We're going to learn today how the service got there, how mature that model is, and what's left to do in this ongoing journey. And for these sessions, we are very glad to have with us Commander Nick Goddard, the Director of Operations for Navy Cyber Defense Operations Command, Barry Tanner, the Acting Executive Director and Command Operations Officer in the Navy Program Executive Office for Digital and Enterprise Services, PEO Digital, and David Volker, the Department of the Navy CIO's lead for Zero Trust. Thank you all for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'd like to just start with maybe a general overview of where the implementation of your Zero Trust model stands. How mature is it really? How widespread is it across the Navy? And you know, how are you able to get past all this theoretical discussion that we've been having about zero trust over the past few years to something that's real as quickly as you have? Maybe we can start with Dave on that.
Yes, good morning. So as far as the maturity, I think we're doing fairly well as far as implementing zero trust. Flank speed is coming along a lot better than I expected and very surprising. We're actually in the process of developing a Department of Navy zero trust implementation plan. Currently, it's still in draft, and we plan on sending out that draft document for a broad level review in the next few weeks for comments and feedback. And the lessons learned that we gained from flank speed and all the great work that PEO Digital has done is going into that plan. And we definitely are looking for more successes from that group. And really the credit for how we got so far so fast goes to the PEO Digital engineers and cybersecurity professionals that have been working towards this result since 2019, even before the Portfolio Management Office for Zero Trust was set up at the DoD level. So a lot of credit should go to them. When the Portfolio Management Office defined what target and advanced zero trust looked like and what those particular functions were, partnering PEO Digital and the Flank Speed team with them made a lot of sense. And we're able to evaluate how well that implementation has done, and it's very promising.
And maybe we can take just one half a step back and let folks who may not know what flank speed actually is, because it's important to understand what that is and how that plays into this whole discussion.
So I'll jump in on that one. Just from the standpoint of flank speed is the Navy's implementation of Microsoft Office 365 on the surface, but it's also all of the security capabilities and underlying technology that defend all that information using tools in Microsoft's Azure cloud. So this was the first time that the Navy decided to essentially go all in with cloud capabilities. And when we started that journey, we made a conscious decision to start with a blank sheet of paper and use the work that had been done at places like Dreamport from NSA and Cybercom's experimentation that had happened in the 2018-2019 timeframe, and take the lessons that had come out of those efforts and build them into the implementation of Office 365 for the Navy. So flank speed is it comes from our original Operation Flank Speed, like everyone else in the pandemic era, forced to go very quickly to a mass telework situation. And so flank speed denotes the we have to do this really quick situation that we were in, and the name stuck. So we continue to evolve that platform and use it as the basis for understanding and implementing zero trust in a practical manner. The real key, and I think Dave, I appreciate David's comments on the PEO, but I got to say that the implementation of that framework would not have been successful at all without a very close partnership with the operational community. Teams from NCDOC and NetWarcom were integrated with the efforts from the beginning and drove a number of very critical lines of effort to make sure that what we developed was not just technically accurate, but also operationally relevant. And the real power of the team that we have today is the close integration between us on the acquisition side of the house and the operational community to make sure that as we develop new capability, it's immediately able to go into the operational space and be effective.
Not discounting that teamwork at all. I don't have a doubt for a minute about how important all that was. But how much of a forcing function was that pandemic related work from home requirement itself, that push to get to a 365 environment as quickly as you did? Would you be where you are today without all of that forcing function?
No, it was a catalyst. We had been working on the designs and thinking about doing this before COVID hit. As early as 2018, like I mentioned, we were talking about this is how we need to do it. The original estimates of it is going to take us 4 years, maybe even 5 to get there, given integration challenges and a number of other factors that were facing us. And in a typical environment, it probably would have taken that long. But the pressure of the pandemic, the focus that it gave everyone all the way up to and including the Secretary of the Navy was critical to ensure that everybody was driving in the same direction. It was a very high priority. We were able to remove some barriers that are typically very hard in a government environment to getting things done. I personally have been involved in Navy IT for almost 20 plus years, and I've never seen anything go that fast. So to say that the pandemic really was a major factor in our success is absolutely true.
I'd like to try and connect a little bit more why flank speed was so foundational for Zero Trust for you all. We don't need to get too deeply into the technical weeds here, but, and maybe Commander Goddard, this is where you can jump in. What exactly are the security capabilities that are built into that cloud environment that get you closer or got you closer and got you to Zero Trust?
Thank you, Jared. Yeah, as Barry was talking about, when we had the catalyst to drive us there, it was an operational push from a necessity for folks logging in from home, but how do we defend that? And so traditional acquisition in a 5-year cycle takes a lot longer to actually get capability. So, but when you have a forcing function to drive that, it shows us how to rethink the actual problem. And I think from a Zero Trust strategy that Mr. Sherman had been pushing at the DoD level really allowed us a platform and a framework to drive to an outcome. And so from an operational standpoint, when we talk about, the 7 pillars of Zero Trust, although those are important, what we talk about is an ecosystem of capabilities. So when we talk about migration from a typical legacy environment and we go into cloud, we actually have capability nested within the cloud itself. So in this case, we talk about the Defender suite of tools. We talk about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Identity. It's not just those tools, the tools that we've been using within NCDOC for several years. But when we look at the data itself and how flank speed was able to not just take the data, the identity, the user, some of the devices that we're talking about. When you go work from home, you have either government furnished equipment or you bring some other personal devices. So the ecosystem was very diverse. And so the tools that we had at the very beginning were not very capable at actually identifying threats when it came to those, bring your own device types of things, or even the legacy government devices when you work from home. And so when we talk about MS365, it allowed us to not just look at the endpoints, but also allow tools that were standard within industry for years, and allowed us to leverage that platform in order for us to go faster, not just from a speed and agility standpoint, but from a fidelity of the data. And so that was really important for us. And what we found from the operational side is the visibility of the data and the type of data that we were getting, not just from the endpoint, but from the servers, from the entire ecosystem, allowed us from a defensive standpoint to have better visibility than we've ever had before. And I think that's really important for folks to understand is, was defense bad before? Not necessarily, but the visibility and insight into those networks and the ecosystem was not the same. And so when we saw the volume and the fidelity and the granularity of the data, that allowed us to make much more risk-informed decisions about defense. And I think that changed our paradigm internally about how we think about defense. And so the defense in depth model, although important, is not going away, but the high walls, the deep moats, those are still going to be part of the architecture. But when an adversary gets inside the environment, what do you do? And so Zero Trust allows us the framework and the understanding about how to apply different tools to those 7 pillars and how we actually stop an adversary from moving within our network. And so it's not just cloud. Zero trust is more important than cloud. And I want to make sure people understand that they're different concepts, but they're applied more effectively within cloud as it exists today, because each network is different. And so from a defensive standpoint, cloud allows us the ability to apply zero trust very quickly. And also from a defensive standpoint, where our mission system, our weapon system, from a defensive standpoint, sits in the cloud and allows us the ability to translate technical risk into operational risk.
And going back to the pre-existing environment that you talked about, understanding your point about the fact that the walls and the moats are still going to be there even in a zero trust environment, how much of that legacy security tool set has this let you replace, or is a lot of that legacy stuff that you were previously using to defend the network still going to have a place in the future environment? And I'll just set that up by saying that the reason I ask is, as I understand it, one of the things that the Navy has learned through some of your user experience pilots is the more of those security tools you let build up, especially on endpoints, the worse the user experience is going to be. So how much does this let you simplify, I guess is the word, your defensive posture?
So appreciate that. I think the issue that we run into is, do we need one tool? And so for us, we think about it in ecosystems. Right, the level of tools, for all 7 layers of the OSI architecture are really important for us to look at. And so traditionally, network defense has been at the layer 3 network level, right? So IP addresses, things that you would traditionally associate with defense. Well, when you walk into cloud, you have additional thought processes and additional capabilities that are nested. And so, although our legacy tools are important for older networks and legacy equipment, though the feeds that we require at the network level are still important, things like NetFlow. The challenge is when you properly instrument a network, you get a lot more data. And so from a cloud standpoint, so the volume of data has increased significantly, right? So we're seeing within our infrastructure, seeing about 2.3 billion events every 24 hours. That is an insane volume of data for a human to be able to digest and decompose. And so the legacy tools are important for some of the telemetry feeds that we receive, but what cloud enables us to do is to take those old tools and actually give them new life within the ecosystem of cloud today. So they are enhancing. Some of those tools are going away because we get better insight into the telemetry that we get. And so that is important for us as we transition. So the paradigm shift for us is understanding there are more tools. So we need to stop doing certain things that are going to not provide as much value. And so what cloud allows us to do is, one, assimilate all the data, synthesize it in such a way that we can understand and interpret what the data is telling us, and then allow us to do defensive architecture reviews internally and see what makes the most sense about those tools. So it's actually giving us more options. And so from a flank speed standpoint for our cloud, we're able to take that volume of data that is only going to increase and then look at telemetry and say, is this valuable? Is this not valuable? And so we're able to see a lot more effectively within not just cloud, but hybrid services, hybrid cloud, in order for us to identify where the shortfalls are. So where we accepted before from a network defense standpoint, we were getting all of the boundary data anyway. But what we didn't realize is some of the host-based telemetry internal at the fidelity that we're getting now, kernel level processes, things like identity. And identity has been critical for us because that is one of the things from an adversary standpoint that is very easy to use in walking onto our network. So when we take cloud-based capabilities and identity and tie them together with legacy tools, we get a much more rich environment in order for us to do much more informed defensive action. So to answer your question, it's those tools, some of those will go away, but it's going to augment some of the things that cloud is providing today as we migrate within each of the 7 pillars within Zero Trust.
So to add a little bit of additional context onto that, in the past, security tools were kind of I have a problem, I'm going to solve a problem, I'm going to throw a tool at it, and I'm good. But it was done in all noble intent, but it kind of a more is better perspective, and not understanding the interactions between those tools, and some of that led to technical issues, conflicts between tools, taxing the local operating system with too much to do, those kinds of things. And so the shift in our mindset, as the commander was mentioning, is more about integrated defense than it is about tools. And so the data really drives how we build and deploy what we're deploying. The operational perspective is what we're using to determine what tools are necessary. They say, I need to be able to see this, do this, and respond to that. And we look at the ecosystem of everything that's available to us across all of these disparate environments. And as the commander mentioned, our legacy environments are still going to need tools that can talk to those things, that can understand what's happening there and provide the telemetry necessary. From our perspective, we want to make sure that it's all integrated in such a way that the operators don't have, they're not swiveling their chair between multiple screens, trying to figure out what's going on in multiple places. They have one spot that tells them what's going on in the environment. They have full situational awareness of what's happening from endpoints to servers to, enclaves to whatever, and they can take effective action augmented by the capabilities to give them insight about what's important, what's really going on, and make good decisions. So the user experience comment is spot on. We do not want to keep piling more stuff on endpoints. What we want is effective tools to pull the data we need off of those endpoints so we can aggregate it and give it to the operators to do a good job.
Yeah, and just to chime in there, we've been going towards an outcome-based metric. And as we look at those capability needs that we have for these particular tools, we're really looking at when we have fielded that new capability with the warfighter, is it really what they needed? Is it effective as far as the outcomes that we expect in enabling that warfighter to be able to detect a particular threat rather quickly, noting that there may be 500,000 different users on a network at any particular time, and to be able to pick out a bad actor or something that's anomalous within the network very quickly and highlight that to the warfighter to take action is critical in one of those outcomes.
How do you measure an outcome like that, Mr. Volker?
So as the outcome, we're going to look at it from a human aspect. So is the operator able to use the system? When it comes to combat effectiveness, when the system is measured as far as ease of use, is that ease of use still the same under combat duress? When we actually have some kind of activity on the network, the tempo rises a bit for the operators to continue to be able to effectively use the tools and deploy countermeasures and collect information based on a particular threat that's detected to ensure it is in fact a threat, not a false positive, and then to take coordinated action to either force a re-authentication for that particular user and possibly other countermeasures to help defend the technical baseline.
From a capability standpoint and a metric standpoint, so internally to the defensive ecosystem that Mr. Volker was talking about, we track very specific KPIs, key metrics internal to the network from a defensive standpoint, where we couldn't track the level of fidelity that we had prior to the existing cloud. It allows us to actually instrument and some of the threats that we would have from a malware standpoint or a threat actor inside a network. How long would it take us to, one, identify the threat actor, two, remediate whatever that machine was, and then get it back into service so that way the network owner can continue their mission. And so in the past, it would take sometimes weeks and months, right? And that was a challenge for us. People would have to ship off hard drives, legacy things that didn't make a whole lot of sense from a defensive standpoint. It didn't allow us the agility to be able to maneuver through the network and take action. So within the cloud infrastructure and Zero Trust specifically, those tools allow us to reach out almost remotely without the user even being notified in order for us to take action very quickly and sometimes in an automated fashion. So it sped up incident response into minutes and sometimes seconds. When those tools are able to take action very, very quickly, we can remediate and put that machine back on and identify the threat. And so that is important, from a defensive standpoint. When we're looking at over 2 billion events, it allows the operator to look at the things that really, really matter instead of things that are, attributed to misconfigurations within a network. And so as we're getting rid of false positives and looking at more of the true positives, that is allowing us to move much more deliberate within that ecosystem. And again, Zero Trust allows us a platform to measure against.
And getting back to the cloud aspect of this, I'm going to assume, since much of this, all of this really is implemented through FlankSpeed, that rapid response capability that you just talked about really applies to everyone that's on FlankSpeed. It's not just little isolated clusters of pilots where Zero Trust has been implemented. It's really the whole network. Is that right?
So I'll take that one. Yes, the enterprise network, right? The vast majority of users that are leveraging the tools that exist within the FlankSpeed environment, they're all covered by this. But additionally, because when people think of when they hear the term FlankSpeed in the Navy, they think this thing they see, right? Office 365, that kind of stuff. What we're talking about is all the underlying security architecture below that. And it's reaching out beyond just the cloud environment. It's reaching down into the on-prem environment. It's reaching into accepted networks that have legacy tools. We're getting telemetry back from non-NMCI things, non-OneNet things, right? And for the Navy Marine Corps intranet, our traditional enterprise on-premise network, the OCONUS networks and other things, those are fully instrumented. We've been pulling those things as part of the overall project. But we've extended that out further into other, and again, all of this is on the unclassified network side. We haven't been able to raise this to the classified level yet, although we're working on it. But we have extended out into some of those legacy networks, get the data in so that the folks in NCDOC can use that information as well and have the benefit of this integrated approach. Working hard. Right now, we've got a barrier. Shipboard environments are tough, right? When you disconnect and you go out to sea, bandwidth is limited and it's very hard to get out there. But we've got a lot of folks focusing on that use case and trying to extend these tools and these approaches down out all the way to the endpoint, out all the way out to the afloat networks, and tackling those challenges. Lots of challenges there, but we're working on it. And I think to an even greater extent, this isn't just Microsoft stuff, right? This isn't just the Azure stuff. This extends into all of our hyperscale cloud partners. We're working closely with the Amazons and Googles and Oracles of the world to make sure that as we're extending workloads out into there, we've got a lot of our Navy mission owners that are using those capabilities. We want to make sure that's plugged into this ecosystem so that we can use the data where it is and the tools that those partners are bringing to us as an integrated whole. And getting back to my point about swivel chair operations, we don't want our operators to have to go to different places. We want them to have an integrated view so that those metrics about how quickly can I detect and respond to any anomaly that's out there and resolve that situation continue to be as fast as we possibly can. The last thing I'll put on that is part of being able to do that is testing yourself. It's practicing. And over the course of this journey, we have continually partnered with red teams from the Navy, from DOT&E, from NSA, from a number of different organizations to test us and make sure that what we're doing actually does what we want it to do. When we talk about the outcomes, that's really the outcome. Can you show that your operators, when presented with an issue, can respond the way you want them to and do so effectively, right? Zero Trust, a lot of people talk about the technical aspects of Zero Trust. Actually, the vast majority of Zero Trust is not about tools. It's about the operators, the people, the processes, and the culture. And so you have to make sure that your operational forces understand in a Zero Trust environment, this is how you do this. This is the method and mechanism by which you do secure, operate, and defend your environments and your data wherever it lives. So we're working to extend this approach. Not just it's technology agnostic. Frankly, everyone's bringing something to the fight, and as the commander said very well, we're going to be bringing the best tool that we can find for a given use case or a given environment to get the outcome we're looking for, rather than just throw another tool at it.
I just want to do one more beat on data just to make sure I've got my head around it right, because one of the questions I was going to bring up is not just 10th Fleet, but really all the DoD cyber components have been saying for years, we have more data than we know what to do with. So the natural question is, how does adding more data help? But it sounds like the answer is one, better quality data, and two, automating the processing of a lot of that data so that human beings don't need to actually look at the raw elements of it. Am I close?
Absolutely. And so when we talk about, the 2.3 billion events, that's a lot more data than just those 2.3 billion events, right? So we see anywhere from like 7 to 8 terabytes of data flowing through our networks every 24 hours from a defensive standpoint. And at the operational level, they're in the petabytes, right? So our partnership with Naval Network Warfare Command, which is our sister organization internally, so the secure and operate and the defend we are right next to each other. So when we talk about insight and data, the volume of that data, to your point, has been a big challenge for DoD writ large. But the way we're trying to solve it internally is there's ecosystems of tools that could handle that volume of data. So when we recognize that some of the data isn't valuable, we have the ability to drop that very quickly or assimilate that somewhere else. But the storage, curation, we're not trying to move data unless there's an actual valid incident. So when we talk about the telemetry coming in, we're tweaking that and taking industry best practices and apply them within the defensive environment. Because sometimes there isn't necessarily the right applicability when it comes to defensive networks and DoD and industry. And so our use case is slightly different, where we do care about the data, but the challenge for us is what data is valuable. And so the great partnership between Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Oracle allow us to understand when we try to onboard new types of data, we recognize that there are second, third order effects, not just from a storage standpoint, but are they valuable? And so we're able to use Zero Trust, the framework internal to the cloud ecosystems and the legacy, and apply that framework and say, look, did it give us more insight? And we get the operator feedback very quickly. And so the team on the watch floor that I have from our attack sensing and warning and our 24/7 presence can say, look, this information is valuable or it's not valuable. And so we're able to make assessments very quickly within those environments and understand we have better visibility within cloud. And that includes Amazon, that includes the Google Cloud Platform, right? It's not just Microsoft, to Mr. Tanner's point earlier. We have an ecosystem, we have multiple ecosystems of tools, and the integrated platform for us includes data, decision-making, so that way we can make much more informed decisions. And if the data that's flowing in isn't relevant, then we look at other alternatives. And within the cloud ecosystem and Zero Trust, we're able to maneuver and say, look, this data worked or didn't work. And if it didn't work, why didn't it work? Is it our inability to understand the data, or is it just simply it's data that isn't relevant based on the threat we're seeing within that environment in that network operation center, as an example?
All right, we do need to take a quick break here, and we will be back shortly later on in this event with Commander Nick Goddard, the Director of Operations for the Navy Cyber Defense Operations Command, Barry Tanner, the Acting Executive Director and Command Operations Officer for PEO Digital, and David Volker, the Department of the Navy CIO's lead for Zero Trust. We're going to send you back to the studio right now, and we'll be back with more on the Cyber Leaders Exchange.